Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 818. Today we're going to take a look at Star Wars Battle of Hoth. This is a new game from Days of Wonder, designed by Richard Borg, who is famous for the Command & Color series, which this is a part of, and it's a co-design with Adrian Martineau. It also had this little icon here that says Galactic Battles. I don't know if you can see that on the box cover. So I'm not sure if this is a new series of games that are Star Wars games or space Command & Colors series, something like that. I'm not sure what that is for. But this is a 2 to 4 player game. I've only played it 2 player. And if you play 4 players, it's in teams of 2. And you'll run through a bunch of scenarios set in the Hoth system in the Star Wars universe. One side plays Empire, one player plays the Rebellion. And yeah, so let's go down to the table. It's not really that much different at all from normal Commands & Colors, so the overview will be pretty quick, and I'll come back and tell you what I think. Okay, so I've got kind of a pseudo game set up here on the board with various different pieces. You've got the Imperial side on that side, Rebel on this side. The game does come with these cool card holders, which come apart in 2 pieces. You can store them back in the box, and you can just put your hand of cards here, which is pretty nifty for such a small box game. And you'll actually notice, if you're familiar with Commands & Colors games, this board size is actually pretty compact and small compared to some of the other games, which is nice actually. One thing that is also nice is if we plop down here, you can see the insert in the box here. So all of the Empire and Rebel units are all in these nice little plastic totes, and you have a space here for dice. Here's a spot for terrain. The card holders go in here. The cards themselves will go into here. And you've got some spot for some different terrain tokens there. Then you put the board and everything in there. It all packs away very nicely. Now, the reason I bring that up is on first blush, it seems like it might just be kind of a smaller, portable, maybe lighter version of a Command & Colors game. Not the case. If we take a look here, look at the scenario book, we have here 18 different scenarios. Now, the last scenario here requires 2 copies of the game. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'll talk about that in the review. But even if you leave that one out, still 17 different scenarios that you can play through. You can just go through and play through those in order or randomly. But then you also have 2 separate campaigns where you'll play multiple games in a row, and you have a book, I should say a booklet, for the Rebels and the Imperials for each campaign. So there's campaign 1, here's campaign 2, and then as you play, it's got just a couple extra little rules there for campaign play, and then you'll have this kind of branching narrative where you'll set up different battles. The battles will come out of the book, so there's not like new scenarios in here necessarily, although some of the objectives and some of the decorations for the scenario will be a little bit different when you play it in the campaign, which I'll explain in a second. And you've got various different endings and stuff like that. So for such a small, compact box, you've got 17 scenarios and then 2 full campaigns where you play, I think, 3 or 4 games. I've not played any in the campaign, just looked through the rules for it. I just played some one-off games. Now, if we just take a look here, just real quickly, it's the same kind of Command & Color style game. I believe Roger Smith has a walkthrough of actually how to play the game. So if you're not familiar with Command & Colors, I'm not going to go over it here, but you can watch that just for some detail. But basically be playing cards and activating units in one of the 3 kind of flanks here, or maybe just, doing what the card says on the text. This is just exactly like, the other dozen games in that kind of series. The difference is, though, each player has their own deck instead of a shared deck of cards. So in that case, if somebody, draws a card that you really need, or you're planning to kind of use towards the end of the game, they're not going to keep that away from you. You're going to have your own sort of copy of it in here, so you don't have to worry about that. It's still random, based on the deck that you have, but that's kind of an interesting part of it. One of the reasons that they did that is because you also have these leader cards. So here we'll look at some Imperial leaders, and if we look here at the bottom, you can see Darth Vader. So there's 3 Darth Vader cards. There's 3 of these Maximilian Veers, 3 Admiral Piets, and so on. And then we also have here for the Rebels, so here's 3 Han Solo cards. And so you can, based on the situation that you're doing, either play without those, or each player can choose a set in secret, and if they do, they'll choose the 3 cards that go with that particular leader, shuffle it into their deck, and that'll just give you some cool special abilities and so on. And then if you're playing through the campaign, it will actually kind of tell you based on the scenario to include or not include leaders and specific leaders and so on. The other part that's going to happen is you also have these cards here, which are Imperial and Rebel. These will get added to your hand. You will be able to basically have these in the course of the campaign. So these are not for just one-off games, although why not play with them? There's no reason you couldn't. So typically what will happen is that you'll get a reward, as you know, for various scenarios of the campaign, and then shuffle up these decks and draw a random one. And these were going to act as like augmentations or auxiliaries to your normal hand of cards here. So they don't count as part of your hand because each scenario will give you kind of a hand limit that you'll have. So you may add, you know, let's say this in this case for the Rebels, you might have this one extra card, and you will play these along with you know, a normal card to sort of juice that up. So it's just kind of cool little flavorful pieces, you know, that work into the campaign in that way. Now, some other differences that are pretty neat is you also have, you know, you got your typical stats for the unit. So let's look at one of the stat cards. There's actually 2 of these in the game, and they're double-sided, so each player can reference, you know, what your units can do and what your opponent can do. And so you can see here, they've got the movement speed, what their amount of dice rolls that they roll in terms of the range. So if you look at the infantry here, you know, adjacent spaces they'll roll 3 dice, then 2, then 1, and then anything beyond 3 is, you know, is out of range. Or instead of, you know, moving once and shooting, you can move twice. And then this one here, for the speeders, these can move 3 spaces, and so on. This gives you the dice that you can roll short range, but you can do a lot of damage. And then here are the dice that will actually damage that particular unit. And you can see for like the AT-AT, you just need 1 hit to kill it, but you've got to kind of like roll this symbol or this symbol and then roll another hit after that based on the number of symbols that you roll. So it's, you've got to kind of double roll to kill the AT-AT, and then it'll go away. And it moves very slow, but you can see the range doesn't, you know, affect the number of dice that it rolls. So you have these sort of basic sort of loadouts for the unit, and then depending on the scenario, you might have these other little tokens here that you will add, you know, adjacent to the unit, put it in their little hex there, and so that's going to give them another special ability that'll be dictated by the scenario there. So that's kind of a cool way to sort of, you know, add some variability and stuff like that to the game, beef up those units a little bit. So these cards are very handy, just a very easy, quick reference. You've also got here this one double-sided, although it's the same on both sides, reference for all of the different terrain. Very easy to digest. I mean, they really have the system nailed down and ironed out. And as you can see, you know, I'm spoiling the review here, but the production level is really, really good, especially for the size of the box and the price of the box and everything. It's a really good deal in that way. The only other thing I would mention is how you score points. And this isn't different from every Command and Colors games, but it's just how it works in this case. So depending on the scenario, you might score points in different ways, which isn't really a new thing, but not all Command and Colors work like that. So if you typically wipe out a unit, and then you as the opponent, so let's say this speeder unit was wiped out by my opponent, they would take one of these, and then if you look here, in this case the Rebel player has a little track here for victory points. So let's say I wiped out, you know, one of their infantry, so I keep that one, so that would count as a victory point. But they might get victory points in other ways, so you might take a point that way. And so usually you play to a certain number of victory points. And it's not always going to be, hey, if you remove this unit, you get a victory point, or if you do this objective, you get a victory point. It's going to vary from scenario to scenario. So in a lot of ways, I would say this is, in terms of that part of the game, most like Memoir 44, as compared to some other things like, you know, battle lore, samurai battles, and other things like that. And also because you've got some fast moving units and a lot of range, there's not really the concept of melee in this case. So it's going to feel a lot more like Memoir 44 in terms of how the units kind of work. And then of course some of the special abilities are very similar. And then also kind of how you generally score points and how it's going to get changed up by the scenarios. Okay, so that is Battle of Hoth. We'll just jump into my pillars of review. First we'll talk about player count. I've only played it 2-player, not tried the team game like I said at the beginning. I've come to find out there's actually kind of a universal solo mode that is meant to be work with just about any Command and Colors game. I don't know that it would apply to that It came out for various GMT games that they've released over the years, because GMT's probably released the most variations on the Command and Colors. If you look up, I think it's called Stuka Joe's Command and Color Solo Mode or GMT Solo Mode. The rules are like 2 pages. I glanced through them. I was like, I think that would work, but I'm not sure. So you could theoretically play the solo. I've not tried it. Like I don't even want to hazard a guess if it would work or not. But as a 2-player game, it works really well, and I like that player count with this. The play time, the box is 30 minutes. I would say yes, definitely, because it plays very snappy and very quick, especially once you kind of get to know, what all the terrain does and the different units and that kind of thing. And, splashing in the variability of some of the support cards or the leader cards or the different specialized units in the different scenarios. Not a lot of overhead there, especially if you've got like a game or two under your belt. I just jumped right ahead and we played through, it was like scenario 7 or 8 or something. And it's like, oh, this is really cool. How all these different little wrinkles and variables are adding to the game. So yeah, I don't think any more than 30, 45 minutes at most for a 2-player game for sure. Now there is an epic game where you actually flip the board over, get another copy of the game, flip that board over, and then use units from both games, and then you have like a big epic battle. In that case, I didn't try that, and I'm kind of 2 minds about that. But let's go ahead and jump into the third pillar, which is like, what is this game like, or basically how would I compare this to other Command and Colors games? And I really like 90% of this. And I don't often talk about the price of the game, but I think in this case it makes some sense, because I think MSRP is $60. I've seen it on sale for $60. I've seen it on sale for like $48. And if you look at the amount of scenarios, you got the 2 campaigns, you got some nice plastic and components and all that stuff. You have a lot of things to kind of tinker with and play with in terms of the leaders, the support cards, the different scenario special abilities, the different objectives, the campaign objectives, all that stuff. Packed into this like really tight box. It's a really cool production from that point of view. And I often don't talk about production necessarily because, it gets sticky, I guess. And sometimes it's not interesting. And I think in this case it is interesting because, like I said, there's so much in the box for around $50. It's 2025, and that is just a sweet, sweet deal, and hours and hours and hours of gameplay for a really cool, fun system. So at the end of the day, I really have enjoyed Command and Colors over the years. I've played I don't know how many different games in the system, but it's a lot of fun. It's just a very quick, easy game that doesn't have zero strategy, but doesn't have like an immense amount of strategy. It doesn't bore you at all, like from the word jump all the way to the end of the scenario. It's not boring at all. That's the main thing. You're always kind of like screwed over by your deck, but like working around that and trying to get around that, trying to be smart about holding cards and, letting the game kind of fish out cards for you, and, taking stock of what other abilities are in play and that kind of thing. And then you add on top of that the 2 campaigns, which is just like, man, this is like butter on top. It's really, really neat. And frankly, I kind of came into the game thinking like, I don't know, this just feels like it's a very small, little light game, not really knowing what was in the contents. It's just like, it's just kind of a one-off thing. But to the credit of the folks that were involved with the production of this game, they added all these extra elements where I think, even if this doesn't have an expansion, which is what I was kind of thinking, was that this game's going to need expansions down the road to make it, to make it a full game. I don't think that's the case at all. I think if they never come out with anything else for this is a nice, compact, complete experience that you're going to get a lot out of. There's going to be a lot of replayability here with all the different variables and everything I've spoken about 100 times already. But it's a really cool little package. Now, could they add expansion to it? Oh, of course they could, and they probably will. And so I'm going to leave with my recommendation and then jump ahead a second. So do I recommend this? 100%, especially for the price, and if you like Star Wars or you have kids. And I will say this, my kids are all grown, but I used to play Memoir with my youngest son, and he used to love it. We used to love it. And what I would do is I would take out all of the cards with words on them at the beginning. And because he was 8 or 9 at the time. And so he could read, but kids don't want to read when they play a game. So we took out all the cards with the text for the first, I don't know, few games of it. And it was just like, do this flank, do that flank. So I think you could do something similar here. And then you can start introducing the extra cards. And then it's good to introduce it because then they are reading and they're able to learn how to read as well from playing games. So I recommend this too if you have like kids that are into Star Wars, 100%. But yeah, it's just easy recommend across the board. I mean, if your eyes light up at all, Battle of Hoth, just get it like that. Now the one thing that's interesting about it is in terms of the expansions and theoretically what kind of ecosystem would come up out of this, because some Command & Colors games have no expansions, I think, and then some have countless. And this is most like Memoir in terms of the gameplay, which I just kind of talked about in the walkthrough. So because the box is so kind of small, I can almost see them releasing like different theaters. Like, so we could have an Endor box, we could have like a Clone Wars box, like a Gungan versus Robots box. We could have then a I don't know, whatever different scenarios in Star Wars that there are. You could have like Clone Wars, like from the cartoon, and that kind of stuff, which I don't know anything about, so just Clone Wars cartoon stuff. And that would be kind of neat to just have like a little series of little boxes, maybe like 4 or 5 or whatever, over the next few years, that you can kind of pick and choose your theaters. Because some of these units here, well, all of them, are very specific to, the cold weather setup. So as far as like compatibility with other stuff, it's gonna be kind of weird. I mean, the AT-ATs is about the only thing you can swap out in the probe droids. Everything else is like Hoth stuff. So it would be kind of strange. And then also, if they just came out with more and more Hoth stuff, I feel like I'm gonna get bored of that pretty quick because it's snow. Okay, more snow, great. But if they do different terrains, because you got snow, you could have big trees and forests, you could have desert or whatever. You could do like a Tatooine thing, like the Hutts versus the Black Sun or something. Or like, I forget what the other gangster group is. But you could do cool stuff like that. And that would be kind of neat, just have different theaters and then that's it. The one thing that bugs me about it is that last scenario where it's like, oh, hey, go buy a complete other copy of the game to play one scenario. It's like, guys, you had everything going for you with all of the compactness and just the fullness of the game, everything for the price, and then you just tack on that like little bit of chase to buy an extra copy for like maybe something you would do once or twice. I was like, I get it. It's just like a nice to have for rich people, like, you know what I mean? This is weird. Like, why would you? It just strikes a discord against, the rest of the presentation. It's very strange. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know what their plans are. Maybe they will do stuff that would like beef it out and would make it worth having 2 copies. And I don't know. There's something about it. I can't quite put my finger on it. This sort of irks me a little bit. But anyway, so yeah. So that's my only kind of like question about it, I guess, or criticism, which isn't even really a criticism. It's just kind of something I'm sort of wondering about, because just taking it on its own merits, throwing out that last scenario, it's a great little package, and I would recommend it across the board. If you start wondering about the ecosystem and expansions and whatever, the life of the game, whatever, then there are questions about kind of how they would do it, and I'm more just curious than anything, not really being critical, other than that last scenario thing. But yeah, so I think that's really cool. I think just get it like it is, and then there's some questions about how they would expand this. Are they just going to make it a bunch of boring snow stuff, or could they do different theaters and that kind of thing? I don't know. I personally think, I'll stop now, is it would be neat to just have boxes like this, little small affordable boxes that really excel at doing the one theater, the one set of games with lots of cool different options and variables and all that stuff, and just cram all that goodness into one little box that's affordable, and then jump to the next one. And then you can go and pull things out as you want. And maybe they could do like a a big campaign across all of them, you know, kind of similar to something like, oh, I don't know. You think of it in a couple of different, I'll throw out a few examples, like there's a game called The British Way, where you play like 4 games across different theaters all over the world, and then you kind of score victory points out of each of them, and then there's a winner at the end. Or something like a map campaign where you're doing a Warhammer or other miniature game where it's like, okay, you scored points here, won some campaigns here, so you score some points, and then now you jump over here and do that. I mean, you could get all convoluted with that. I don't know if that's really a cool idea, because it seems again to go antithetical to what this is telling me when I look at this little box. But I'd love to see different theaters, different units, and all that stuff. And hopefully it sells well and they can kind of do what they want. But anyway, I recommend it. Thanks.